Robert, welcome to Lifelong Streetcar.
Thank you. It's great to be here. My first podcast.
Oh my gosh! Of all your accomplishments, I kind of feel like I'm going to totally brag on the fact that we were your first podcast.
You're my first.
But I do have to be completely transparent with you because I did get you here under the guise of doing a podcast. But the reality is this is more of an intervention because you are very much an arts board junkie. Like
That's right.
You have an addiction. You cannot say no to an arts board. It doesn't matter if it's ballet, if it's music. It doesn't matter. You say yes.
Yeah, I've had a long career in the performing arts. Started out as a performer and worked my way up into management and then doing boards. And I love it.
What was your performance? What were you known for?
Musical comedies. I was what they call a slash, which means actor, singer, dancer.
Oh, I thought you meant you played for Guns N' Roses.
No,
you were the
no, I wish. I wish. No, a slash. And I always said I was a singer, dancer, talker because I was not a very good actor.
Okay.
So when I stopped being able to dance, I retired.
But I would think a slash would be a pretty important role because you can sort of fill in on all kinds of different sets.
It's critical. And today on Broadway, if you can't do all three, it's very hard to get hired unless you're some sort of a star.
Okay. So were you on Broadway or were
I did some on Broadway tours, off Broadway, regional theaters.
Good heavens.
Yeah, it was fun.
So then how did you get from performing on Broadway to hanging out at an art gallery on a local podcast in Tucson? I know there's a few years in there, but like what transpires there?
More years than I'm ever going to admit. It's a funny story, and you can edit this out if you want. But when I quit performing, I was working at Actors Equity, and we had those cubicles, with just waist high or shoulder high walls. And I heard this woman screeching that she needed a managing director, but she had no money. And I was making the transition from performing to management, I hoped. And so I went over to the guy she was talking to. Who is this? He told me. I went out to her theater in Montclair, New Jersey. I went in her office and said, I need a job. I want to be your managing director. Do you have a resume? Yes, here it is. She said, you're an actor. You're not. You have no experience. And I said, well, you have no money. So it's a match made in heaven. And it was someone who became very famous later, Olympia Dukakis.
Oh, wow.
And she became my mentor and dear friend for many years, passed away a couple of years ago. And that was where I got my start.
That's hilarious. You're not an actor. You're not a manager. You have no money.
That's right. It worked very well. It was a great relationship. I had Valium on my desk because she was very intense. But it was fun and, remained friends for years.
I thought you were going to say, well, I'm an actor. I can act like I know how to manage. But that's what I thought. That's what I thought the line was going to be. But
that would have been a better answer.
I don't think so.
I didn't have it then.
I think your answer was perfect. So that gets you, does that end acting for you?
Yeah, it
performing?
really did. Yeah. I always thought I would go back to it, but I just enjoyed managing and I enjoyed being around the art and learning how it was made, the whole thing rather than just my piece. And so I never really looked back and had a great time doing what I did. And now I'm consulting. I'm with the ballet right now, Tucson Ballet Tucson. And so I'm still, doing it.
Okay, yeah. I saw on your resume, it's like whenever there's a vacancy, someone needs a board member or an interim director or something, they call Robert, and it's like, is Alpaugh like Latin for I'll do it? Is that?
As long as no, boards, you don't get paid, but when I'm interim this or that, I get paid.
Uh-huh. And then as a consultant, it seems like from what I say, again, on LinkedIn, it was much more about philanthropic consulting and helping people achieve, kind of crazy ideas to make things happen in this world, not just necessarily supporting set organizations, but helping anyone kind of achieve a different level.
Yeah, a lot of what I did was hospitals when I was really consulting with a big firm in Chicago, hospitals, museums, universities. And
hang on. So we're in New York, we're in New Jersey, we're in Chicago. Is it easier just to name the big cities you haven't lived in?
Yes, never Los Angeles.
That's it?
Yep.
What about like Northern California, San Francisco?
No, but I've lived in the top 5 cities. Okay. New York, Boston, New York, Chicago, LA, Houston, and Phoenix.
All right. And Tucson.
Yeah, Tucson.
Tucson. We're top 7 or 8 maybe? No.
I don't think so. Phoenix is 5, which really surprised me.
Was your role with the theater company, was that what brought you to Tucson originally?
Yes.
And roughly what time frame was that?
1989.
Okay.
George Rosenberg, who was one of the people who saved the Arizona Theater Company and was very instrumental in getting the Temple of Music and Art open and refurbished, called me and said, we're interviewing. And I said, well, yeah, I would love to interview. So he arranged for me to come to Tucson. I interviewed, and I had to make a decision very quickly. He said, we need to know in a week. And coming from New York to Tucson, making that decision in a week was hard, but I never looked back. I was thrilled.
And that's got to be such a commitment to a project. You couldn't have known too much about what you were getting yourself into.
I didn't. I knew that the theater had been in severe financial straits just before I came, and probably was the closest ever to closing. But the Temple was on the horizon. We were performing at the Leo Rich Theater at the TCC at the time. And the Temple was on the horizon, and we were right in the beginning of doing a management agreement with the city of Tucson, where ATC would be the managing tenant of the Temple, also, though, making it available to other local arts groups as well. And that deal was on the table. And George and others here in town really worked very hard to close that deal. And the Holzclaw family, Alice Holzclaw, was the one for the theater who really did close that deal. She, I think, either $200,000 or $300,000, which helped us buy lighting equipment and sound equipment and things like that to really turn it into a state-of-the-art theater in 1989.
So we've got, and I think even now I get somewhat confused, but you have two separate entities that are coming together at this point. You have the Temple of Music and Art, which that launched in 27, you told me? Or
the Temple of Music and Art opened in 1927.
Okay.
And it was started by the Saturday Morning Musical Ladies Club. And it was a group of women who got together and did musicals and brought opera singers and other people in from all over the country to perform here in Tucson, Saturday Morning Musical Club.
And did they build that building as the Temple, or did they renovate it from something else?
They built it, and there's a very funny story about that, which I learned later. The architect, and I don't remember his name, but the architect for the Temple built that theater, for Tucson. And you can see it's very Spanish colonial and Southwest. It's gorgeous. And the Pasadena Playhouse in Pasadena, California, was building a new theater at about that time. And the assistant to the architect who built the Temple did the design for the Pasadena Playhouse. And actually, he just ripped off the whole design and flipped it, though. So when you walk into the Temple here in Tucson, the restaurant's on the left, the box office is on the right.
Wow.
And in Pasadena, the box office is on the left and the restaurant's on the right, and the art gallery is upstairs in the center like ours is, like the Temple. And so there are two theaters in the country that are exactly the same, except the one in Pasadena is flipped.
I love stories like that. You just don't. I would never figure that out. I mean, if I stumbled into that theater, I might have recognized that.
You would.
But that's the only way I think I could know it.
The fountains in the middle. It's exactly the same.
And so they created the Temple of Music and Art. Do you know where that name came from? Because that seems interesting to me. That's not just like a performance hall or something.
Well, I could read you a quote from the original, the woman who really spearheaded this.
You talk about prepared. He's got a quote from 1927. That's awesome.
I'll read it. We are offering you this temple with its spirit of music to be yours for all time, to enjoy, to care for, and to cause to grow. Let its harmony spread from the few who are here to the many who are not here. Tonight it is young. Into your kind hands and big hearts we place it. Look then into the future and make it the Mecca of art.
Wow.
And this was written by Madeline Heinemann, who was really the driver of creating the Temple of Music and Art. So it was a temple like Greece.
Yeah, it's very much like I was going to say, very, very much that sort of Grecian idea, and this idea of spirituality that comes through that. I wasn't sure because we have like the Labor Temple, we've got the Masonic Temple, we have all these, and I was kind of curious as to how they get there, because when I look at that facility, it certainly is much more than just an arena, because as you said, there's so many different connections to the artist community within there. But I've always wondered if the temple was which came first, but I guess they came together.
They came together because a lot of people do feel like theaters are temples, and that's where the stories are told. It's where lives are examined and shared. And it is very spiritual because many, many souls and lives live in that space, and they change week to week, month to month.
And when I go back to see something, I'm always recalling a show that I'd seen there previously, so it's, even though that show hasn't aired and hasn't been performed in maybe a couple of years, I'm still thinking about, I remember when I saw this and this is what happened. So I guess it is sort of my own ghosts that are there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of ghosts in the theater.
Your time is around 1989. Between 27 and 89, though, the building, do you know much of that history? Like it operated for how long and then it fell apart?
I'm not sure how long it operated as the Saturday Morning Musical Club, but it did fall into disrepair. It had become a place for like vaudeville in the 30s and 40s. It became a home for Spanish language films that were shown there. The Borderlands Theater performed there for maybe a year. And then it really fell into disrepair. And it sat for a long time. And in fact, it was going to be not torn down, but it was going to be there was going to be a 6-story office tower built in the back of it for as a law center with the library, the art gallery in the temple was going to be the law library. They were going to keep the facade, and it was going to become an office building. Do you
know roughly what time period this was?
Yeah, this was probably in the early 80s.
Okay.
80s, in the 80s.
It seems like maybe when the convention center, the Leo Rich Theater, the music hall, that becomes such a prominent place in Tucson that some of these other theaters might have struggled to keep up in the 60s. I don't know if that's the time connection or not, but
I'm not really sure. But certainly the community wanted to save this building because of its historic prominence and because of the fact that it was the temple. And so there's a guy who still lives here, John Hudak. He's the publisher of Tucson Lifestyle now.
Okay, yeah.
John was one of the really lead people who saved that building. He led a group of people who chained themselves to the chain link fence and said, you can't tear this down. Got the city involved. Tom Volge, the city manager, who I don't remember. Tucson Downtown Partnership. All of these, Tucson Chamber. The community really got behind it and said, it was a firm out of Colorado. And the community just said, no, we can't lose this building, because they had lost so much when they built the TCC.
That's the other side of it, that we had so much history and culture that was put under all that concrete. So to turn around and I can see a community rallying to save something.
It was amazing. So the city really spearheaded this, and I forget the guy's name, but he was a city employee, and he was the project manager. And my first year there, we were overseeing with the city the renovation. At one point you could look from Scott Avenue all the way through to Stone, see right through the building. The stage and the back of the stage was wide open.
Oh, wow.
If there was a storm, it would blow through the temple. I mean, it was a major, major restoration. And everyone who worked on it did an amazing job.
Yeah, and if you're trying to locate it, because we haven't really mentioned, it's on Scott. It's McCormick and 14th are kind of its boundaries there, and it's near what we call the Children's Museum, but was the Carnegie Library at the time. So you have the Carnegie Library, you have this temple, so you really start to create a philosophical place here in Tucson where people are able
the idea was to make that the arts district, and the temple certainly was going to be the anchor. The things that were hoped for didn't really all pan out, because of the economy and other priorities. The Scott Avenue streetscape, which is now complete, was supposed to open at the same time the temple opened. It didn't open until 20 years later. And that's all the planting and the new curbing and the sculptures and the lighting. It's a beautiful street now, Scott, between Broadway and whatever it is, 16th Street or whatever.
It is. And at the corner of Broadway and Scott on both sides, there are pillars with testaments to the neighborhood that talk about the history and some of the names. And I had walked by that so many times, and before I stopped to actually read it, and fascinating the people in this community that drove in the passion that created what they created. Because if it opened in 27, I mean, these people were in the late 1800s, early 1900s were coming up with this idea and pushing that idea forward, and to be still using that facility for its original purpose. It's so cool to experience that.
Well, it's very cool. And Tucson is kind of known for that. The Fox Theater, Herb Stratford led that renovation. And now he's leading Teatro Carmen, which is being brought back. That's,
as you were talking about the state of the theater, the temple, I'm thinking, okay, we'll be telling this story in 30 years to people about the Teatro Carmen and, Rialto Theater, all of these things that were at some point on the verge, all of them were on the verge of becoming something very basic and mundane and parking lots or buildings. Yeah. And there are people that stepped forward and maybe not have saw the final vision, but knew enough that we have to at least stop the destruction, and then we'll figure out the path forward.
Right. Yeah. Opening that temple and restoring that was a big step forward, and I think paved the way for doing the Fox, and Teatro Carmen. Herb has really done an amazing job for Tucson. I don't know him. I just know his name.
Yeah, he has. We actually just had his wife Carrie on a couple of weeks ago, because she's been a driving force of that too. Just two people that they met at the U of A, and just really started falling in love with Tucson and figuring out ways to make it better. And they've done so much. Yeah, but you get here, at the time you get here, the renovation was complete?
Not complete. It was, no, it was not complete. But it was far enough along that we were making decisions then about the seats, about lighting equipment, sound equipment, carpet, toilet facilities, and that was really an interesting thing because, budget. And so we didn't go with the state-of-the-art toilets that we wanted. We went with toilets that fit the budget. And carpet, the carpet's been replaced now, but, the carpet we did, and the painting, we were making it a theater.
Right.
By the time I got here.
Okay.
We were still performing at the Leo Rich, which just was not built for theater. It works. The ballet performs there, and it works quite well for ballet because it's a wide stage. It's not deep enough, but it's a wide stage. And when we went into the temple, our production manager was able to really make that stage what it needed to be for the work that Arizona Theater Company wanted to do in there. So when we opened the temple, we opened with Peter Schaefer's Amadeus. And it was a magnificent performance. The designers used every inch of the space. The side stages, which are now closed, but the side stages were used. And the production elements that we were able to create in there were just spectacular, and really was a huge lift for the theater.
And how are you on time? Because we're going way beyond, which is fine.
You do whatever you want.
Okay. So then let's talk about the other element of this combination. That's the theater company. So we have the temple that's built and that's had its uses, but you have the theater company. Like, what's the origins of the ATC?
Well, ATC started as Arizona Community Theater, I think. Sandy Chamberlain, I think. And then it morphed into Arizona Theater Company. It was an amateur theater when it first started.
Was it a Tucson-based organization?
Yeah, totally Tucson.
Okay.
It is Tucson-based ATC. Ballet Arizona used to be Tucson-based. This is where the art starts. Okay. Ballet Arizona Opera started here. I think Arizona Opera always did Phoenix, But and we always did Phoenix, but we started here, and we didn't always do Phoenix. The theater started doing Phoenix, 10 or 15 years into its run, and we performed at the Scottsdale Center for the Performing Arts. But the theater really, after Sandy, they hired Gary Gisselman, and he was here a long time, maybe 20 plus years, and he really improved and built the quality element of the theater. Not only just play selection, but the production values and the actors that he hired really put the theater on a forward trajectory as a professional theater. And it's it's the only professional theater now that performs in two cities. They perform in Tucson and in Phoenix, now I think in Mesa. But the Herberger Theater Center was built for Arizona Theater Company, and we moved into that, I think, in 92. We opened the Temple in 90 and opened the Herberger Theater in 92. So it was quite a period of growth.
And that theater is in downtown Phoenix?
Downtown Phoenix. Yep. It's right across from the music hall and up the street from the new arena.
Okay. Yeah, and I've been by there. That's why I wasn't sure if we got it from Phoenix or if we brought it to Phoenix. The plays that I've seen there haven't been musicals. They've really been more theatrical. Is that?
Yeah, a regional theater, which is what ATC is, tries to do a balance because you have to, please a lot of people to be successful. And used to be said that subscribers were the lifeblood of the American theater. And so you had to please those subscribers, and they were coming back 6 or 7 times.
Okay.
So you had to give them a good variety. Not so much anymore. Subscribers. The younger folks and even the older folks, especially after COVID, are really deciding to select what they want to see and not pick a whole season. So it's changed a lot.
Okay.
But you still need to provide a variety of work for your community. So a musical, a comedy, a recent Broadway show, drama, mix it up.
And what about the talent? Is it like a group that rotates through, or do you do open auditions do they do open auditions for every performance? Yeah,
it's hard for me to not say they, because although I was here a long, long time ago, I still feel very
right.
I love that theater. When I was here, we auditioned in Phoenix, New York, and LA. And Seattle. And I think that's pretty much still the same. Gary Gisselman worked a lot in Seattle, so he had those relationships, and also in the Twin Cities. I don't know what they're doing today. So
some of this talent, then they're being found in other. They're not Tucson born and bred in a lot of cases.
Some are.
Okay.
We always want to have some balance of using local art because there are talented people here. But it's an equity company, and that has certain restrictions on.
I'm not sure what an equity
Actors Equity Association, which is part of the AFL-CIO labor union.
So you got some restrictions on who you can hire and what you can pay.
And yes, very much so, and that's negotiated every 2 or 3 years. And there used to be a concept. ATC is a LORT theater, L-O-R-T, and that used to be League of Resident Theaters. Okay. Now it's regional theaters. There used to be a lot of resident companies around the country where people would live in a community and come and live there and work there all year. That doesn't happen as much anymore because of the economics of that. So now most theaters do pick up auditions wherever they choose to audition from and bring the talent in while using local talent as well.
All right. And then is that the same for like the back of the house and the production? And
back of the house is usually all local.
Okay.
Designers could come from around the country. There's a great lighting designer, Philip Rosenberg, who is actually the grandson of George Rosenberg, who really saved the theater. George Rosenberg saved that theater. He went in for a year and acted as CEO, non-paid, to keep that theater open. And his son just coincidentally went to U of A in lighting design and designs for Broadway. And I think he won a Tony Award for something. I can't remember. A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. He won the Tony Award for doing the lighting for that. So, they use Philips sometimes, but designers come from all over, wherever they find the talent that fits the project.
And then if there's a performance, I've noticed it's a week or so in Tucson and then the same show up in Phoenix. Is it then the same cast? And so they'll just carry it through. And so when they make a commitment to come out from LA or someplace, they might be here
or from Phoenix or from Tucson.
They might be here for a month to.
Well, they're usually here probably for 3, 6, 9 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of rehearsal, 3 weeks here, 3 weeks there. But I don't. This is not my thing anymore.
I got you. So
I'm historic.
So you take over in '89. You move from New York to Tucson. You're like, okay, I can do this, and there's got to be some culture shock in that. But you're then rebuilding the theater, working with the company. When did you open for business as the ATC at the Temple?
October 1990. And that was with Amadeus.
Okay.
And that was also the first year ATC ever did a gala. We had tables and chairs in the courtyard and made a dance floor in the street and closed down Scott Avenue. And that was the first gala they ever did.
Well, they're doing them. They're doing them every year now.
They do them now, and they're a lot of fun. October 1990 with Amadeus, with an amazing cast.
And how long was your run then at the theater?
In the Temple, 5 years.
Okay.
And then a year at the Leo Rich.
All right. So you this is not to be in any way a suggestion, but why are you still in Tucson then? Like, what caught you to stay here?
Well, we fell in love with the desert, first of all. Very spiritual. We love the monsoon season. We don't even mind the heat. So when I left ATC, which was for some political reasons that I'm not going to go into, we thought we'd go to Chicago for a couple of years and then go to LA or go back to New York. We didn't know. We stayed in Chicago 19 years, always knowing that we would move back here.
Oh, so you did leave Tucson after. Okay. So
when I left the theater.
Okay. So you did leave. All
Tucson.
Right.
And I had no job when we left Tucson to go to Chicago.
Welcome to the arts world.
Oh, my God. I was a candidate for managing director at Steppenwolf Theater, which is one of the country's premier regional theaters. And I didn't get it, but we were sort of counting on me getting it. And we sold our house here. And it all worked out, but it was pretty scary when both of us ended up there, and my partner, Rob, had a 6-month contract with a design firm, and I had nothing.
Well, sometimes that, I guess I would imagine that energy and that angst on some people destroys them, and others it rises them up to find other challenges.
Yeah, I think the energy and excitement is going to make Kamala Harris.
There you go. You had to. There's politics I'm not going to talk about, but there are politics I am going to talk about. And your partner Rob, we've talked. That's actually how we met. Rob Waters is an artist at the Tucson Gallery. I was doing a Meet the Artist podcast, which you can check out on the Tucson Gallery's website. And he mentioned your history here, and I was like, I got to talk to Robert. I got to find all of this stuff out. And then you moved from Chicago back to Tucson in a kind of in a retirement capacity.
No. I had been working at one of the largest consulting firms in the nonprofit space, Campbell and Company, and I negotiated with them, and I took 2 of my clients with me, started my own company, Alpaugh and Associates, which I had for 12 years. Gave it up during COVID because I couldn't travel anymore. I used to fly 3 times a week.
Oh, boy. Okay.
And I didn't want to fly that much, but I was making money. And we all need that. So when COVID hit and I couldn't travel, after that, I closed my business. And now I'm still working, but only for things I want to do and for people I know and like.
So do you think, is Tucson, again, no commitments, but is Tucson now home for you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As they say on Chip and Joanne, this is my forever home.
All right. I've got to look up Chip and Joanne now. See, I always get homework with these episodes. I come in here with all these questions and I get to leave with more questions.